You're not really wife material, more like a soldier playing dress-up, Claudette said, and the whole table laughed. That night, I sat at the far end like furniture, silent, tolerated, erased. But what they didn't know was that I'd already made my choice. I wasn't there to apologize. I was there to wear the one thing they feared most, my name, stitched above my heart. Before we dive in, let me know. What time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. The chandelier above the Ashcroft dining room always reminded me of frost. Cold, intricate, expensive. Like it was made not to give light, but to watch people squirm beneath it. That night, its silver arms stretched over a long mahogany table, set with bone china and glasses so thin I was afraid to breathe near them. Around me, the portraits of Merrick's ancestors loomed, all severe brows and naval uniforms, staring down like I didn't belong. I was seated near the far end, just to the left of the hallway that led to the restroom. Drafty. Isolated. I could smell the faint tang of cleaning chemicals each time someone opened that door. I told myself it didn't matter. Told myself again when Claudette breezed past and didn't even acknowledge me. I smoothed the creases of my OCP blouse and held my lips in a thin line. Professional composure. Vivian, my mother-in-law, tilted her wine glass. "Avery, darling," she began, voice soft like velvet with a splinter inside. "We were just talking about the challenges of maintaining poise when one's lifestyle is unconventional." Her eyes didn't blink. "What's it like? Being a wife in uniform? In circles like these?" Laughter tiptoed down the table. My fork hovered over the edge of my plate, untouched. Merrick wasn't here. He was still deployed, somewhere over a desert neither of us could pronounce. I thought of the last note he'd tucked in my duffel. "You're stronger than all of them put together." I didn't feel strong just then. I managed a polite smile. "It's a different rhythm, I guess." Claudette tilted forward, blotting the corner of her mouth as if she'd just been handed a juicy secret. "We do admire your practicality," she said. "Truly. I mean, living with less. It's admirable, in a way. I just can't imagine Merrick trading down so drastically from how he was raised." My chair scraped faintly as I shifted, resisting the urge to stand. The porcelain plate in front of me had a small crack, just barely visible beneath the pattern. My nails traced it as I counted. Inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4. I wasn't going to break. Not here, not yet. Then Claudette cast a sidelong look and added almost lazily, "It's just that when I think of female soldiers, I don't think grace. It's hard to tell some of them apart from the men these days." There it was. The chandelier didn't flicker, but something in me did. I didn't bother flipping the switch when I stepped back into the apartment. The amber glow spilling from the stove light was enough. Shadows pooled long across the linoleum, and the air carried the faint mix of lemon cleaner and stale coffee. I dropped my keys into the chipped ceramic bowl by the door and leaned against the wall, just breathing, trying to find something solid in the silence. My uniform still clung to the scent of perfume and polished wood. I peeled off the blouse and draped it over the hook by the window. The fabric rustled as it settled, and my fingers brushed the name tape stitched just above the pocket. Colleen A. smudge darkened one corner. Duck sauce, maybe. I'd tried dabbing it out with cold water, but it held on. I stared at the stitching, slightly frayed at the edges. That strip of fabric weighed on me more than the entire uniform. I thought of my dad the first time he saw me in ACUS. October light bouncing off his truck windshield as he pulled up to the barracks. He didn't say much, never did. But when I stood in formation, his eyes filled. Afterward, he walked up and placed a calloused hand over my name. Not the flag, not the rank, just the name. "You're carrying the country," he said, voice low. "But more than that, you're carrying our name." He didn't mean bloodline. He meant who we were. Truth, grit, loyalty. Working class steel and stubbed fingers and doing right even when no one noticed. Now I was married into a family that never used my name without something bitter curling around it. When Merrick and I got married at the county courthouse, I wore my dress uniform. Vivian declined to attend. Claudette sent a Hallmark card with perfect cursive. "We wish you the best with your decision." That word, decision, hit like a slam door. The first Thanksgiving after the wedding, I baked a turkey breast for one and FaceTimed Merrick in Qatar. The Ashcrofts posted aspen photos, champagne flutes, fur-lined boots. One shot made a local magazine, the whole family beneath a pine tree captioned, "Family above all." I stared at that headline too long. I only noticed I'd been pacing when the floorboards let out a groan, restless. I grabbed my fleece, tied my hair back, and stepped outside. The night air nipped my cheeks. Streetlights buzzed faintly, and the neighborhood near Fort Bragg was quiet, save for an occasional car. I walked without direction until a neon sign blinked in the distance. The Soldier's Mess, an old diner beside a shuttered pawn shop and a laundromat that never opened. The bell above the door jingled. Warmth wrapped around me. Meat sauce, coffee, melted cheese. A woman behind the counter looked up, wiping her hands on a faded apron. 60s maybe, silver streaked through her bun. Her eyes didn't scan me, just a nod. "You look tired, honey." "Sit down. I'll make you some lasagna." I sat. No argument. The plate she brought was steaming, cheese browned and crisp at the edges. I didn't speak, just ate. Bite after bite. The tension leaked out through my fingertips. I could have cried, not from the food, but because no one asked me to explain myself. Rosa, that was her name, though I didn't know it then, cleared the salt shaker beside me, said nothing. She moved like someone who treated quiet moments as sacred ground. That was the first time in months I'd felt seen without being measured. I walked back slower. The air had cooled, though perhaps the chill was rising from me instead. In the kitchen, I sat at the table Merrick and I bought for $50. One leg still wobbled unless you leaned just right. The name tape lay on a folded napkin. I stared at it again, and quietly, not sure who I was talking to, I whispered, "Have you ever felt like a guest in someone else's life? Like no matter how much you show up, smile, serve, you're still just background noise in someone else's picture?" I reached for a fresh wipe, held it, then let it drop. Instead, I picked up the name tape and placed it gently into my palm, folded my fingers over it. I sat like that for a long time. The wind off the Long Island Sound had that sharp, salty bite that slid right through the seams of my uniform. I pulled my collar higher, but it didn't help much. The valet avoided my gaze as I approached the front of the Greenwich Yacht Club. He took the keys like he was handling something damp and unpleasant. I hadn't planned on being here, but Rosa, bless her, had nudged me when I stopped in for coffee yesterday. "Sometimes," she said, handing over a muffin wrapped in a napkin, "you show up just to remind them you're still standing." So I came. Straight from the base, mud still clinging to my boots and the stiffness of command still hanging on my shoulders. I didn't even have time to change. My Army combat uniform stood out like a grease stain on fine linen among the pearls, boat shoes, and pastel cocktail dresses that shimmered across the lawn like a school of fish, pretending not to notice a shark in their midst. Inside, the chandeliers gleamed brighter than they had any business doing at a midday event. The carpet smelled of money, real estate inheritance, old wood, and hush-hush divorce settlements. A woman with a clipboard glanced up when I gave my name, blinked, then gestured vaguely toward a table in the back, next to the kitchen doors. The chair wobbled slightly as I lowered myself onto it. The linen napkin had a faint coffee ring already stamped into its fold. I placed it across my lap anyway. From where I sat, I had a view of the side of a support column and the edge of the pastry table. Behind me, servers hustled through swinging doors with trays of crab cakes and champagne flutes. Across the room, Merrick's family clustered at the central table, laughing, clinking glasses. Vivian wore something cream-colored and structured like always. Claudette's hair was piled high, her earrings big enough to serve drinks on. No one spared me a glance. I shifted in my seat, boots scraping gently against the marble floor, a noise too clunky for the soft jazz playing overhead. Eventually, the speaker took the podium, a polished man in his 60s, all square jaw and fundraising energy. "We'd like to thank the families that make this community strong," he beamed, reading from a gold-trimmed note card. "To the Ashcrofts, Vivian, Claudette, and of course, Merrick, serving overseas. A round of applause for their unwavering service and sacrifice." People clapped. Heads turned. Glasses were raised. My name wasn't mentioned. I waited. Thought maybe there'd be a final line. And Merrick's wife, too. But the moment passed. The applause faded. The speech carried on. I remained in my chair, fists clenched beneath the tablecloth. The buzz of the room blurred around me until Claudette leaned over from the adjacent table, her lips close enough for me to smell her floral gin cocktail. "Oh, don't take it personally," she whispered, voice syrupy smooth. "You're not exactly one of us." Then she smiled and tapped my hand lightly, like a dentist soothing a patient before the drill. That one sentence, so casual, so exact, landed harder than I expected. Not one of us, not family, not wife, not equal. I was decor, functionally invisible, until someone needed to make a point about diversity or military sacrifice, preferably without the discomfort of the real thing. I watched Claudette laugh at something Vivian said. They both tossed their hair in the same direction, like synchronized swans. Someone snapped a photo from across the room, perfect smiles, perfect legacy. I rose, the legs of my chair scraping loudly against the floor this time, and a few heads turned. Briefly, before returning to their canapes, I threaded through the crowd, moving toward the exit. No one stopped me. No one even called my name. Outside, the air had cooled, and the sky turned the soft steel blue that only comes just before dusk. I paused at the edge of the club's veranda, looking back through the glass doors at the party still humming, still full of light, as if nothing had shifted. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder and walked down the stone steps, boots striking against the concrete with every step. Not fast, not fleeing, but not lingering either. The wind tugged at the edge of my uniform blouse, and I didn't bother fixing it. The parking lot smelled faintly of salt and exhaust. I slid into my car and shut the door. For a moment, I just sat there, both hands on the wheel, not turning the key. The name tape on my chest caught the dying light. Colleen, slightly smudged but still holding, still stitched tight. I exhaled through my nose, started the engine, and turned out of the lot. The GPS rerouted. I didn't need directions. The bells on Rose's door let out a tired jingle as I shoved the door inward. The diner was almost empty, just a couple of regulars nursing their nightcaps, and a teenager slumped over a homework packet in the far booth. A muted baseball game flickered on the wall-mounted TV above the counter. The lights buzzed faintly, casting a soft amber over the faded linoleum floors. I slid into my usual booth by the window, even though I wasn't planning on staying long. I didn't take off my jacket. I didn't glance at a menu. Rosa noticed me right away. She didn't ask what I wanted. She just poured a cup of coffee, added 1 sugar, just 1, she remembered, and brought it over along with a thick slice of warm apple pie and a scoop of melting vanilla ice cream. "You look like you needed something sweet," she said gently, placing the plate in front of me. "And don't go pretending like you're not going to eat it." I cracked the smallest smile, grateful she hadn't asked any questions. For a while, we just sat in silence, the kind that doesn't demand anything. She busied herself behind the counter, wiping it down even though it was already clean. When she finally returned with her own cup of tea, she settled across from me with a quiet exhale. "My husband used to sit just like that," she said, arms crossed, jaw locked, staring at nothing like the war followed him home. I didn't move. I let her talk. Sergeant Major David Esparza, 23 years in the Army, killed in Fallujah in 2006. Big man, quiet voice. Only ever raised it at the TV when the Giants lost. Her eyes didn't water. They didn't need to. The weight of memory sat in her voice like a folded flag. He used to say silence was armor. For the longest time, I believed him. She leaned forward, cradling her cup. But sometimes silence is just a cage. One you build yourself. One you decorate with good intentions. The pie cooled, untouched. My hand lingered near the coffee cup, unwilling to raise it. Her words didn't sting. They seeped. She didn't know my story, not all of it. But somehow she'd nailed it anyway. That feeling of standing still in a storm, thinking endurance was bravery when all it did was let people forget you were even there. I cleared my throat. You ever get tired of being polite? Rosa chuckled, low and earthy. Honey, I'm 62 years old. I ran out of patience for politeness around menopause. I laughed softly. Not because it was that funny, but because it gave me a reason to breathe again. She stood to grab the coffee pot, then paused mid-step. Say, that sister-in-law of yours, Claudette, right? My eyes flicked up. Yeah. She ever go to Lexington Academy in Vermont? My old friend June used to teach there. Said there was a girl, sharp tongue, silver spoon, a real piece of work, got expelled back in 2010. Something to do with bullying. Real nasty stuff. One of the students ended up needing counseling. I blinked. You're sure it was Claudette? Rosa shrugged. Didn't say the last name, just Claudette with the fake smile and the sharper nails. Sounded like a match. My mind didn't race. It didn't even jog. It just noted, marked it down somewhere behind my temples like a pin on a map. I didn't say anything more, and Rosa didn't push. She topped off my coffee and switched the TV to something softer, a documentary about old lighthouses. When I finally got up to leave, the teenager was gone. The booths were empty, and the pie sat half-eaten, the ice cream puddled. Outside, the air had turned crisp. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk in uneven spirals. I tucked the to-go box under my arm, Rosa insisted, and zipped my jacket halfway. I didn't feel better. Not exactly. But something had shifted. Maybe it was just the pie. Maybe it was Rosa's voice. Or maybe, just maybe, it was hearing for the first time that someone like Claudette might have her own shadowed corners, even if she always stood in the spotlight. I didn't walk faster. I didn't look back. But the name Claudette echoed differently in my head now, less like a stone and more like a window that had been cracked open, just enough to let a little air in. The clang of metal plates rang through the gym, bouncing off the cinder block walls. I didn't flinch, just racked the bar and dropped onto the bench like gravity had finally caught up with me. Damn, Avery, Harlan said from across the weight room. You planning on fighting something? Or someone? I wiped the sweat off my neck with a towel and sat up slowly. My arms were trembling, but I didn't want him to see that. Something, I muttered. Then, after a breath, maybe both. Harlan crossed his arms and leaned against the squat rack. He was one of the few people on base who didn't treat me like a curiosity. Just a guy with more deployments than clean t-shirts and a habit of telling the truth like it was gospel. You're training like you're prepping for Kandahar, he said, narrowing his eyes. But you've been back stateside for over a year. So tell me, who's in your crosshairs? I hesitated. Not because I didn't know, but because saying it out loud felt like crossing a line I wasn't sure I could uncross. It's not that kind of enemy. Harlan didn't move. They sit across from you in ballrooms. I continued quietly. Wear pearls and smile when they talk about you like you're a rescue dog. They pat your arm like you're something admirable, but fragile. Breakable Harlan didn't blink, just nodded once, slowly. That's the problem. You think it's not a battlefield just because it looks like a dining room. I let out something between a laugh and a sigh. He stepped closer. It's still combat, Avery. Just dressed in lace and linen napkins. You think the rules are different, but they're not. The wounds just bleed slower. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed on the bench beside me. Unknown number. I stared at it for a second too long before swiping to answer. This is Avery. A pause, then a woman's clipped, practiced tone. Hello, Sergeant Colleen. This is Cynthia from Mrs. Ashcroft's office. She asked me to extend a personal invitation to the Ashcroft Foundation's annual gala next Friday evening. She believes it would be a wonderful opportunity to reconnect and move forward. I didn't respond right away. Cynthia filled the silence with politeness. It'll be held at the Glenridge Estate Ballroom. Formal attire, of course. Mrs. Ashcroft is quite hopeful that you'll attend. She asked me to tell you that it's time for healing. I stood perfectly still, the phone pressed to my cheek like it weighed 10 pounds. I'll consider it, I said finally. Wonderful. I'll mark that as a tentative yes. I almost ended the call, but Cynthia's voice returned, breezy as a blade of ice. Oh, and please, wear something appropriate this time. My breath hitched, not enough for her to hear, but enough for Harlan to catch the shift in my stance. I didn't answer. I just tapped the red button and lowered the phone. He didn't ask what she said. Instead, he picked up the barbell I'd dropped earlier, balanced it across his palms, then set it down again. You ever notice how scared rich folks are of boots? I raised an eyebrow. They act like steel toes are going to scuff their hardwood floors, he added with a wry smile. But really, it's what the boots mean. That you've walked through things they couldn't even name. That you don't play by their rules. That you won't bow, I didn't speak. Just sat on the bench, heart thudding. Not from exertion this time, but from that last sentence. You won't bow. That was the truth I'd never dared to say out loud. Not to Merrick, not to anyone in his family, maybe not even to myself. Harlan picked up a towel and tossed it at me. Show up, he said, half turning toward the locker room. Not for them. For you. His footsteps faded, the smell of chalk and iron lingering in the air, mixed with something else, a kind of permission I hadn't known I needed. I lowered my gaze, steadied my breath, and felt resolve settle into me like a weight I was finally ready to carry. The apartment lay still. Only the hum of the fridge and the faint ticking of the wall clock filled it. My duffel lay unzipped on the bed, boots polished, uniform pressed and ready, everything in its place, everything except me. I sat at the kitchen table, elbows resting on the cool surface, fingers curled around a cup of lukewarm tea I hadn't touched in over an hour. My Army combat uniform hung on the coat rack across from me, the name tape Colleen slightly crooked. I should have fixed it. I didn't. My fingers quivered as I reached for a pen and an old notepad. For once, I didn't want to type it out. I wanted to feel the scratch of ink on paper. Dear Merrick, I wrote. Then I stopped. The silence deepened, thickening around me like fog. I breathed in, tried again. I don't know where to begin. You're probably somewhere dusty, hot, exhausted, and I hate that I'm about to make it heavier, but I can't carry all of it alone anymore. The words came in slow drips. I told him about the dinner, about Claudette's voice, silky, smug, slicing through me like paper cuts, about the chair by the restroom, about the yacht club and the speech where my name vanished into the background noise, about Cynthia's careful cruelty and the warning behind her smile. I got as far as, and there was a night I almost walked away. I mean, really walked. My pen hovered above the page. That wasn't the whole truth. There was that morning, the one I hadn't told him about, the one with Vivian's slap. Her perfectly manicured hand cutting across my cheek like it belonged to royalty dispensing justice. I stared at the page, the pen waiting. Then I dropped it. Not because I couldn't write it, but because I realized something far more painful. I didn't want him to know. Not because I was protecting him, but because I was ashamed of protecting her. I pushed the notepad away. My throat tightened. The kind of tight that doesn't come from tears, but from restraint. Years of it. I reached into the drawer beside the table, pulled out the paperback Harlan had given me last week, dog-eared and worn, daring greatly. He said it wasn't his kind of book, but the quote stuck with him. I found the page he marked. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's the most accurate measure of courage. I closed my eyes. Let the sentence linger. My thumb traced the edge of the page. I had worn body armor, carried rifles, done night raids, patched up soldiers with hands shaking from adrenaline. But none of that made me feel as exposed as sitting in that ballroom in Greenwich. It wasn't bullets that made me bleed. It was their smiles. The note stayed on the table. I didn't fold it, didn't seal it, just left it there, half written, like a wound half healed. In the stillness, I looked again at my uniform, at the name tape. I'd scrubbed that thing 100 times, trying to keep it clean. But it never stayed that way. Oil, blood, dust from countries that didn't know peace. And somehow, still, it felt like the most sacred thing I owned. Not because it said U.S. Army, but because it said Colleen. I stood and walked to the hall closet, opened a narrow drawer at the bottom and pulled out a fresh patch, newly stitched. The letters were bolder. The thread a deeper black. I had it custom made last month and hadn't used it yet. Colleen. Not for sale, I peeled off the old one carefully and pressed the new patch into place. My fingers lingered on the fabric. This time, I wasn't going to that gala as someone's inconvenient wife. I wasn't going to smile politely while they reshaped my story into something softer, safer, quieter. I slipped into my uniform, buttoned each part deliberately. The fabric folded around me like memory, discipline, dust, and dignity. Standing in front of the mirror, I didn't see fatigue in my reflection this time. My posture shifted. My eyes didn't look away. Let them whisper. Let them flinch. I would walk in tomorrow wearing every part of me they'd tried to erase. The valet didn't even know what to do with me. I stepped out of the car and handed him my keys without a word. He blinked at my uniform, then forced a polite nod before disappearing behind the wheel. Gravel crunched under my boots as I made my way through the illuminated garden walkway toward the Ashcroft estate. It looked more like a palace tonight. Glowing chandeliers, white roses in sculpted hedges, strings of soft lights curling around pillars like champagne vines. People drifted through in satin and silk. Clutches snapped shut, laughter rippled, and then they saw me. It wasn't loud, not the kind of silence that crashes in. It was a subtle shift, like the air had decided to pull back, just enough for my footsteps to echo. Conversations dimmed, heads turned. A few blinked like they weren't sure if I was real. I walked straight ahead, spine steady. No mascara, no earrings, no heels, just army combat uniform, just boots. A woman in a floor-length emerald gown leaned toward her husband and whispered something behind a manicured hand. A man in a navy tux narrowed his eyes. I caught a glimpse of myself in one of the tall glass doors, broad shoulders, clean lines, unapologetically military, and realized I looked like a foreign body in their bloodstream. Claudette appeared, as if summoned by scent. Her dress sparkled like frostbite. "This is inappropriate," she hissed, stepping directly into my path. "This isn't Army Day at the zoo." I didn't answer. I simply adjusted my name tape with 2 fingers, just enough for her to see the stitching, Colleen, not for sale. Her gaze darted downward, lips parting as if to fire another round, but I stepped around her like she was just furniture. Inside the main hall, the crowd was thicker. Waiters passed hors d'oeuvres I didn't touch. Conversations resumed, but the unease lingered. I was a reminder of something they couldn't quite name: grit, war, discipline, class. A quartet played soft jazz under an arch of white peonies. The smell of money was thick in the air: Chanel, truffle oil, polished stone. But under it all was something sour. Maybe it was anticipation, or the kind of cruelty that dresses in lace. Lucian took the stage, flanked by 2 event coordinators and a glowing screen that flicked through images of charitable foundations, gala sponsors, and glossy photos of the Ashcrofts posing near orphanages they'd never stepped inside. He tapped the mic. As we celebrate the enduring legacy of the Ashcroft family and our commitment to social integrity and public image, it's important to acknowledge when certain affiliations— He paused just long enough for the murmurs to start— may no longer reflect the values we hold dear. I didn't blink. Lucian continued, voice cool and practiced. For the protection of our brand and community, we must be cautious about the kinds of associations we encourage. Not everyone who marries in becomes representative of our vision. I was no longer an individual. I had become a liability, a shadow in uniform. Someone near me sucked in a breath. Vivian, seated in the center, rose with a kind of elegance that should have been illegal. She faced the audience, her voice honeyed and crisp. "Avery Colleen," she said, "please come up here to clarify your position, or excuse yourself." A weight settled across the room. Dozens of faces turned toward me, some curious, others triumphant, a few pitying. My legs wouldn't move at first. Then I rose. My chair slid back with a groan that seemed louder than it should have. I stepped away from the table, pulse thrumming in my ears, the floor beneath me suddenly too smooth. My boots thudded against marble with each step toward the stage. Lucian pretended not to see me. Vivian watched every inch of my movement like a hawk measuring a threat. The coordinator with the headset avoided eye contact completely. I climbed the 3 shallow steps to the platform. My hand brushed against the mic, not gripping it, just touching, like I was checking if it would burn, and for a moment I just stood there, fingertips resting on my name tape, the stitched thread steady against my chest. The air felt like glass. When I touched the microphone, my fingers hovered just above the switch. A single breath lodged itself in my throat, unwilling to come out. The room stretched wide and hollow, a cavern of eyes watching, calculating, waiting for me to crumble or perform. I opened my mouth. Nothing came. The chandelier's crystals clinked softly above, stirred by the air vents. Someone in the back cleared their throat. Another murmured. A chuckle? Maybe. Or the sound of silk brushing against itself, expensive and self-satisfied. I looked down, away from the crowd, away from Vivian's tight-lipped smirk and Lucian's smug expression. My eyes settled on the thin black cord of the microphone stand, coiled like a trap. The words I had rehearsed, on the walk-in, in the bathroom mirror, in my head for weeks, evaporated. Then, from the far end of the room, a chair scraped against the floor. "If you don't speak," came a voice, clear, rooted in gravel and warmth, "I will." I turned before I could stop myself. There she was, Rosa, in a navy blue blouse and worn jeans, her salt and pepper hair pulled back in a clip. She looked so wildly out of place in that sea of pearls and tuxedos, and yet somehow she belonged more than anyone else. In her hands, a folded sheet of paper trembled slightly, but her voice did not. "I've got something here the rest of y'all might want to hear," she said, straight from the Army Public Affairs office at Fort Bragg, not some tabloid, not a fancy invitation list. She paused just long enough for the silence to lean forward. "It's a commendation for Staff Sergeant Avery Colleen for leading a high-risk rescue operation during Hurricane Idalia. 12 civilians airlifted to safety under deteriorating weather. The mission was considered too dangerous for ground transport. She coordinated extraction without a single injury." A few heads turned toward me. Rosa went on. "I figure, if y'all are gonna host a gala under chandeliers that cost more than a soldier's annual salary, maybe take 2 minutes to know who's in the room." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The truth hung in the air like floodlights suddenly flicked on. A slow, hesitant clap came from somewhere near the back, then another, a third. It wasn't a standing ovation, but it was louder than silence. I looked at Rosa. She nodded once, not urging, not demanding, just reminding. So I stepped forward again. My throat was tight, but I found breath. My fingers grazed the edge of my name tape, tracing the stitched letters. Calling, not for sale. "Thank you," I said into the mic, voice steady, "for the reminder." I almost forgot I mattered. That was all. I didn't explain myself. I didn't defend or apologize. I stepped down without waiting for permission or approval, my boots thudding against the stage with a heaviness that suddenly felt grounding, not burdensome. As I reached the carpet, I felt something brush against my wrist. I looked down. The blue handkerchief, the one Merrick sent me from deployment, embroidered with our initials and a tiny stitched eagle, half frayed now, had slipped from my chest pocket during the walk to the podium. I stooped, picked it up carefully as if it were something sacred, tied it around my neck. Its fabric, soft with age, carried the faintest trace of cedar and sea salt, the scent of his cologne, long faded but still there if I breathed deep enough. People weren't clapping anymore. Some had turned back to their conversations. Others stared, pretending not to. But something had shifted. The air was different. Vivian's face was unreadable. Claudette looked like she'd bitten down on a lemon. Lucien had vanished into the crowd. I didn't care. I headed toward the exit at an even pace, neither sneaking nor storming, just walking. With every step, it was as if the floor itself recognized my weight, as if I belonged to myself again. And somewhere behind me, Rosa stayed seated, not following, just present. The way a lighthouse doesn't chase the ship, but stays lit so the ship can find its way home. I didn't make it 3 steps past the side entrance before I felt a hand clamp around my elbow. "Avery, darling," Vivian cooed, her nails digging just enough into my sleeve to warn me. "Might we have a little chat? Somewhere more discreet." Before I could reply, Claudette appeared beside her like a shadow in heels, face sharp with polished disapproval. She didn't speak, just tilted her chin toward a hallway lined with oil paintings and marble busts, a museum of their legacy, cold and curated. I followed. Not because I owed them anything, but because I'd had enough of whispers behind chandeliers. The moment we turned the corner, Vivian's hand dropped and the smile vanished. The mask peeled back without ceremony. "What exactly are you trying to prove, dear?" she asked softly, voice low and venom-laced. "Is this your idea of dignity? Wearing combat boots to a formal event? Undermining your own husband in front of potential investors?" Claudette didn't bother with subtlety. "You're embarrassing Merrick," she snapped. "He's overseas, risking his life, and you're here, making a spectacle, turning everything into a sob story no one asked for." I could taste iron behind my teeth. My fists tightened and released twice before I answered. "What exactly do you think I did in that uniform?" "Bake cookies?" I said, voice quiet but hard. "You think Merrick is the only one who's seen combat? I've been deployed more times than either of you have flown commercial in the last decade." Claudette rolled her eyes, arms crossed. "This isn't about your rank. It's about your behavior. You act like you're the only one who's sacrificed anything. Newsflash, every woman in this family has made hard choices. You're not special." I inhaled once, slow. "Then why do you hate me?" I asked. Neither of them moved. "Is it because I serve, or because I refuse to serve you?" The question hung there, uninvited but undeniable. Vivian's nostrils flared slightly, but she recovered first, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. "You misunderstand," she said, almost gently. "It's not hate. It's concern. You're brittle, Avery, defensive. That's not sustainable in a family like ours." I tilted my head. "No. What's not sustainable is bending until your spine snaps." Claudette exhaled a sharp laugh, then turned as if to walk away. "God, you're exhausting." She took one step. I didn't plan to say it. It wasn't rehearsed, but it was ready, coiled behind my teeth like a match head, waiting for friction. "I know about June," I said evenly. Claudette froze. "And the school board. And why your record disappeared in 2010. She didn't move, didn't speak, but the shift was instant. Her shoulder blades locked, jaw tight, that perfect Ashcroft composure cracked like porcelain. Vivian's head snapped toward me. "Excuse me?" "I didn't say anything," I replied, still watching Claudette. "Just making sure we all understand what family secrets means." Claudette turned back, her face pale beneath her makeup. "You wouldn't," I shrugged. "Wouldn't what?" "Mention that you had a roommate named June who reported you for misconduct, that Daddy paid a lovely sum to sweep it all away so you could go on wearing white at weddings and running PR foundations." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stepped closer, not threatening, just deliberate. "Funny how I've spent years being told I don't belong, that I'm a stain on your legacy. Meanwhile, your biggest fear is someone shining a flashlight into your closet." Vivian was no longer composed. Her jaw clenched so tightly I could see the pulse twitch in her temple. "This is blackmail," she said. "No," I replied. "This is me remembering I don't owe you silence." Claudette finally found her voice. "If you say anything—" "I won't," I interrupted. "That's the part you're missing. I don't need to destroy you to walk away. I just need to stop letting you destroy me." I turned. Vivian called out, the syrup back in her tone but cracking at the edges. "You think this changes anything?" I didn't pause. It already did. I kept walking, past the last of the portraits, past the polished floors and inherited smugness. My boots thudded louder now, heavier than heels but steady. True. And as I pushed open the back doors, the chill of night met my face like a truth I could finally breathe in. I sat in the back row of the press room, hands resting on my lap, boots flat against the marble floor, spine straight. The folding chairs were arranged in tidy rows under the fluorescent hum of a government conference hall, Manhattan's skyline walled off behind thick glass. Cameras buzzed quietly in every corner. I could feel them watching even before the red lights blinked on. Lucian stood at the podium, tie crooked, smile too sharp. He looked like a man confident in his script. I recognized that swagger. He'd worn it the night he toasted me as family, then erased my name by dessert. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, "we'd like to address some recent disruptions involving a family event and certain false impressions that have circulated." He gestured toward the large screen behind him. A grainy clip began to play. Me at the gala, standing stiffly, face tense, surrounded by murmuring guests. The footage had been cut right before the microphone. Then another angle showed me brushing past Claudette. Close, but not physical. The image froze dramatically as if I'd lunged. Gasps fluttered across the room. I didn't move. My fingers curled slightly into my thigh. "And now," Lucian continued, "you'll see what we've been dealing with. Hostile behavior unbecoming of a military representative." But before he could cue the next file, a voice interrupted from the side of the stage. "Actually," came Harlan's deep baritone, steady and unshakable, "let's show the full footage." Lucian blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said," Harlan repeated, stepping into view, uniform crisp and ribbons gleaming, "you've shown an edited version. We're here with the original feed." Behind him, a second screen flickered to life. It opened a few seconds before the earlier clip, this time from a wider angle, capturing Claudette stepping in front of me, her hand poking my chest. Another second passed. She raised her voice, jabbing again, then shoved my shoulder, her face twisted in anger. There was no aggression from me, only stillness. Lucian paled. The audience murmured louder. Several journalists leaned forward, pens halted mid-air. "That's the official security footage," said a woman in a service dress uniform beside Harlan. "Unedited, time-stamped. The Department of the Army has reviewed it. She turned to face the cameras. "Miss!" Colleen acted with restraint under provocation. A beat passed before reporters surged forward, hands raised, voices overlapping. Did the Ashcrofts manipulate the footage? Will the military press charges? Why wasn't this shown earlier? Lucian backed away from the mic. Claudette wasn't there. Neither was Vivian. They'd sent Lucian to do the dirty work. I rose without a word, the room still buzzing. I walked toward the podium, every step deliberate, measured, not rushed. I didn't flinch when the flashbulbs ignited. The press smelled drama now. The questions fired like shrapnel. "Miss, Colleen, do you have a statement? Is this revenge?" I stopped at the mic, nudging it slightly with 2 fingers. "No," I said, my voice even. "It's clarity." Then I stepped down. I didn't need to list what they'd done. I didn't need to shout. The truth stood on its own, clear and blinding. As I moved past the rows of chairs, several people stepped aside, not out of fear, but respect. I nodded at the woman who had stood beside Harlan. She returned the gesture, eyes kind but firm. Outside, the city air hit sharp against my cheeks. Wind curled under my collar. I didn't shiver. I kept walking. Behind me, the doors burst open as more journalists ran out, chasing angles and headlines. I didn't look back. My hands stayed at my sides. And then, as I crossed the sidewalk, a gust of wind tugged at my shoulder. The blue handkerchief, the one Merrick had sent from Kuwait, folded with care, slipped from my pocket, caught the breeze, and fluttered like a signal across the sidewalk. I bent down, retrieved it, and instead of tucking it away, I wrapped it around my wrist. It didn't match the uniform. It wasn't standard issue. But it was mine. And when I looked up, the buildings didn't tower the same way anymore. They didn't feel like they were pressing down. They just stood. And so did I. Morning mist clung low over the grass at Arlington, softening the edges of the tombstones into a quiet sea of white. I walked slowly, hands deep in the pockets of my jacket, boots sinking slightly into dew-soaked earth. The section number was etched into my mind, but I didn't need it. I knew the way. Dad's headstone hadn't changed, just his name, rank, and the years he gave to a job most people looked past. Steelworker, father, the man who once stared at my first uniform like it was spun from gold. I knelt beside the stone, brushing away a few leaves that had clung to the base. "They tried to erase me," I whispered, voice catching. "You told me to hold the name. I did. It burned, but I held." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It wrapped around me like the weight of his old flannel coat on winter mornings. He would have hated the politics, the showmanship, the pearl-clutching hypocrisy. But he would have understood the fight, and he would have told me it mattered. I stayed there a long time, telling him everything. How they dressed it up in smiles and silk, how they cut me out of photos and speeches, how Merrick looked away instead of looking in. I didn't sugarcoat it. For once, I let it all come out. No filters, no holding back. Just the truth between a daughter and the man who taught her to stand when everything said kneel. They don't see me, Dad. Not as someone who belongs, just someone who disrupts the wind picked up, lifting the ends of my scarf. I glanced down at my hands, where I still held the old name tape. Colleen. The same one I nearly threw away more than once. The threads were clean now, though faint stains remained, like scars that didn't fully fade, just softened with time. In the days after the gala, things unraveled fast. Claudette had tried to act like nothing happened, like the public embarrassment hadn't cracked her perfect image. But someone somewhere picked up the trail I left. An old teacher went on record. School board members remembered the whispers. Within a week, she was quietly removed from her leadership role to focus on personal matters. No charges filed, no headlines, just silence and a door that no longer opened for her. Vivian's apology came through a press release, cold, sanitized, as if crafted by lawyers instead of mothers. She never called, never asked what I needed, Just a paragraph that danced around accountability like a ballerina avoiding landmines. Merrick's email arrived 2 days later. Short. Distant. I hope you're well. I saw the footage. I'm not sure what to think. Take care, that was all. He never once asked me if it was true. Never said he was sorry for leaving me to drown alone. I stared at that email for hours before deleting it, but I didn't fall apart. The diner had been quiet the night I went back. Rosa was closing up, the jukebox humming a tune from the 70s. She looked up, saw the weariness in my eyes, and simply poured coffee. No questions, just presence. "You held your ground, didn't you?" she said, sliding the mug toward me. "I didn't mean to blow it up. Sometimes things have to break before they can be seen clearly." I didn't reply, just drank. Now, kneeling in front of Dad's grave, I understood something I hadn't before. I didn't need their approval anymore. Not Merrick's silence. Not Vivian's empty civility. Not Claudette's polished cruelty. What I needed was here, in this small name on this small stone. The man who never needed me to be perfect to call me his daughter. I rose slowly, knees stiff, and laid the old name tape at the foot of the headstone. I'd carried it long enough. It belonged here now, with the man who taught me its meaning. A few steps back, I stood at attention, not for the army, not for ceremony, but for him, for his quiet integrity, for the days he packed my lunch and folded my fatigues when I was too tired to do it myself, for the times he drove all night just to see me swear in. My right hand rose to my brow in a salute. The morning sun caught the edge of the flag in the distance. No music, no applause, just stillness and the sound of wind whispering through trees. As I lowered my hand, I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because something had settled. Not closure. That's a lie people tell to make grief easier to name. But clarity. The kind that comes when you've seen too much to pretend anymore. I turned and walked away without looking back. The air in North Georgia smelled different. Pine needles, campfire smoke, a dampness that clung to your clothes after the sun dipped. I stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the girls struggle with their tarp knots. One tent had collapsed completely, and another flapped like a wounded bird in the breeze. No one cried. That was progress. "Pull the corner tighter, Cassidy," I called, gesturing with 2 fingers. "You want the ridge line clean, not sad." The girl gave me a thumbs up without looking back, tongue between her teeth as she worked. 10 kids, ages 12 to 15, most of them city-raised, some from group homes, some just dropped off for the summer because no one else wanted them around. I didn't ask. It wasn't my job to ask. It was my job to show them how to make fire without matches, how to listen to the woods, how to find themselves when they felt lost, even if they didn't say so out loud. No one here called me Sergeant. No one whispered about the gala or the press conference or the Ashcrofts. Out here, I was just Avery, the woman with scarred boots, calloused hands, and a habit of waking before dawn whether she wanted to or not. After dinner, beans, cornbread, something that resembled peach cobbler, we sat around the fire. The kids talked over each other, laughter pinging like pebbles in a tin cup. It was the last night before their parents came to collect them, or didn't. Mila, the smallest of the group, looked up from her marshmallow and asked, "Miss Avery, were you ever scared of the dark?" The fire popped. A breeze tugged at the smoke, shifting it just enough to sting my eyes. I took a slow breath. "Yes," I said quietly, but only when I thought I had to face it alone. She nodded like she understood more than a 12-year-old should and went back to burning her marshmallow on purpose. No one asked anything else. Later, after the kids were zipped into their tents and the fire had died to embers, I sat at the edge of the woods with my metal mug of black coffee, the kind that could strip paint off a truck. The trees rustled in soft conversation, crickets, distant owls, the shuffle of a raccoon near the trash. I didn't need noise anymore, didn't crave vindication or victory, just this. Breath. Bark under my palms. space wide enough for me to take up room in. "I'm not healed," I murmured, "but I'm no longer hiding my wounds." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They belonged to the branches now. A twig snapped behind me. I turned, hand instinctively brushing my hip where a weapon would have been once. But it was only Rosa, half lit by the moon, a basket cradled in her arms like an offering. "You didn't have to walk this far," I said, standing up quickly, startled but smiling before I even realized it. She looked like she'd stepped out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Wind-blown hair, plaid scarf, and that knowing smirk like she was always 3 steps ahead of whatever you were about to say. "Yes, I did," Rosa said, as if it were obvious. "You're my people now." The basket held warm rolls wrapped in a checkered towel. She handed me one without ceremony, then lowered herself onto the log beside me, joints creaking, sighing like the ground had been waiting for her weight. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The fire had died out. The camp slept. The stars came out in careful silence. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't preparing a speech or biting back an apology I didn't owe. I wasn't defending my name or trying to remember who I was before someone else's shame painted itself onto me. I was just here, with the night, with the trees, with the scars that no longer asked for explanation, and with Rosa, who smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke and had walked through the damn forest just to remind me I wasn't alone. Sometimes the battles we walk away from are the ones that heal us most. I used to think I had to prove my worth in rooms that didn't want me, earn a seat at tables set for someone else's story. But out here, with smoke on my jacket and dirt under my nails, I've learned something simpler. Belonging doesn't come from approval. It comes from truth. Have you ever found peace somewhere no one expected you to belong? If this story resonated with you or reminded you of your own fight to be seen, I hope you'll stick around. There are more voices like mine, and maybe like yours, waiting to be heard. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be here, telling the next story when you're ready.